Hello, everybody, and welcome to the finale of our 2021 speaker series. I am Roxana Pardo Garcia of La Roxy Productions, and it has been an amazing and grand honor to be able to facilitate this space alongside communities of opportunity. And we welcome you to our grand finale, and we're so glad that you are able to join us on this lovely Thursday afternoon. We want to go ahead and move on to the next slide. The next one. Today's event is Cultivating Community Possibilities. We have some amazing panelists. A quick little change, Uba is unable to be here with us today, but she was very good. She was real great at finding us someone last minute. So we welcome our third panelist, Bo, today. And we thank our moderator, Kamau, our panelists, Colleen, Joseph, and Bo, for joining us in this conversation about about community possibilities and the future, really. Let's keep going. As always, we'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are in the homeland of the first peoples of this land, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Puyallup, Snoqualmie, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, and Tulalip tribes. We raise our hands to honor all of the descendants of the Coast Salish people. We thank them for their hospitality as the first people of this land and for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We honor the immense, immeasurable, and often unrecognized contributions and sacrifices of the Coast Salish and Indigenous people, and we acknowledge the ongoing disparities, racism, and political invisibility experienced by Coast Salish and Indigenous peoples of this land. And we thank Sun for this land acknowledgement as they are graciously gifted it to us. At this moment, I'm actually going to pass it on to Kai, who's going to give a little bit more context around communities of opportunity.
Thanks, Roxana. Thanks, everybody, for being here. As Roxana shared, this speaker series is part of Communities of Opportunity within our learning community. Communities of Opportunity is a public-private community initiative funded by King County through Best Starts for Kids and the Seattle Foundation. We support community partners in their work to advance better health, safe and affordable housing, increase economic opportunity, and build strong community connections. We approach this social change through partnership work that shifts policy, systems, and relationships towards a just and equitable future. COO works across 3 strategy areas to invest in community-led solutions for a healthy and thriving King County. These strategies impact our health, housing, economic opportunities, and community connections. And this speaker series is supported through our learning community. The learning community is the strategy that aims to support community-led solutions by learning together, uplifting our narratives, as well as creating opportunities to build skills and capacities in a community-centered learning space. Next. So this speaker series, I have had the pleasure of working with the planning and design team of La Roxy Productions and BDS Planning. I want to thank Roxana and her team, Manny and Leo, as well as Ishmael, as well as Caroline Burney from Cascadia Consulting, who supported with the administrative and Zoom support, as well as Whitney Johnson from the Communities of Opportunity team to help to both design, brainstorm, and support this amazing speaker series over the last 6 months. This speaker series started as an opportunity to tell the story of COO. We started with our beginning story, and we created space to uplift our partners' work and place it in larger stories and narratives that our community partners are working on. All of this moving us towards a more just King County. Next. So our last speaker series focused on healing, and Roxana and I and Whitney talked a lot about what does healing mean in this moment. And we took the opportunity to step back and really think about all that our communities and our leaders and our families have been going through. And we really created a space where we were able to lean into the practices of how we cultivate our own individual and collective healing. I want to thank our panelists, Curtis, Arishide, Diana, and Maile, and our moderator, Matt Echohawk Hayashi, for the beautiful space that they created for us to lean into the conversations and practices of healing. From those conversations, some key takeaways, I think things that we know, but it's so important to hear again, is that healing is central to our liberation, both our own and our collective liberation. Healing trauma is about restoring power, autonomy, feelings of safety, both individually and collectively. That often our healing practices take place in spaces that are transgenerational and collective, and at the center, relationship is present. We also listened to the deep work that we need to do to decolonize our healing spaces and structures. White supremacy, colonialism has taught us to separate our mind from our body, and that when we're able to reconnect, it actually is an act of justice. We can create that connection through rituals that support wholeness, balance, and connection, such as breathing, tapping, and other somatic practices, or by being in presence of our community through our elders, through our youth. And crucial to healing is self and ancestral knowledge, understanding our identity, where we come from, how we arrive at this moment, our histories. And then we also really talked about, how we need to keep doing this work. It activates us all. It sustains us. In the last few years, we've all been operating and reacting and moving at a pace that isn't necessarily sustainable. And so we encourage each of us as individuals and collectively that if we want to continue our justice work, that we continue to support our individual and collective healing. Next. So that brings us to today. And I can't think of a better group of people who are going to lead us into some imagining and cultivation of what our future holds. We have a really wonderful group of leaders with us. And so I will pass it back to Roxana to share a little bit more about our journey and the panel we have today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Kai. Can we go to the next slide, please? As a reminder, please drop your questions into the chat or the Q&A button that is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be capturing them and we'll bring it back to our panelists towards the end of the event to answer them. Also, closed captions can be accessed by clicking on the CC option on the bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Next slide, please. The journey. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what has brought us here today. So this is the finale of a 6-part speaker series. And when we were in the design phase, one of the things that stood out is we need to talk about a journey and the things that are involved in a journey, the creation of a journey, the movement of a journey. And we started with talking about the reflecting on the foundation and then the initiation of COO and the work of COO. And then we moved into, once we have a foundation, what does our imaginations and what can imagination look like? And we talked about imaginations in terms of the new economy. We also talked about the ways in which we need to culturally shift in order to be able to do work that is meaningful and that can have long-lasting impacts. We also talked about reimagining, community abundance. Like, what does it look like in philanthropy, right? A philanthropy landscape that now has to exist within the context of a global pandemic and the things that has brought on to the funding landscape. And of course, this last one, we talked about healing, because everything throughout all of our sessions led and told us that healing is necessary. Healing is needed. And once we are able to heal, once we are on our journey to healing, we can talk about futures. We can talk about the future. And so today is our conversation about the future and all of the possibilities that can exist as a result of community-based transformative work, right? Of work that is led by community, that is grounded in community and that honors and values and uplifts and amplifies community. So it's been an honor to be on this journey with you all. Thank you to everybody who has signed up to each and every one of our speaker series. It's been incredible to witness this from the beginning to end. And so just wanted to share some reflections and some gratitude with you all as we move into our last panel of this series. So we will go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So I want to do a grounding exercise. As you all know, we've done these throughout the entire series. Today's going to be a little bit longer just because of, we're in celebration mode. We are in reflection mode. And so I just wanted to thank Diana Mena, who was with our last panel for this particular grounding exercise. And the reason we do this is because I don't know where you all are sitting. I don't know where you all are coming from. There is a full moon tomorrow, and so things are a little chaotic. It's a little wild out there. Not to mention it's a global pandemic and the holiday season is upon us. And so I wanted to take a moment to connect us to our breath and to remind us of our humanity through this particular grounding exercise. So if you feel comfortable, please close your eyes and I will walk us through this grounding exercise. I ask that we connect with our breath. Take a deep breath in and a breath out. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. I want you to imagine that you are a tree, and from your head, leaves are born that touch the sky with the celestial. The sunlight enters through your crown. It flows down your center, through your chest, your arms, your hips, your knees, your ankles, and to the soles of your feet that are planted firmly on Mother Earth. Imagine that roots are born from your feet, firm, thick, and solid roots. They are buried deep into the source of water in the center of Earth. Now imagine that these roots expand into a circle of protection, 360 degrees, and you and the roots are growing strong, joining those of your relations, hugging, strengthening by becoming more solid. Now imagine that the roots expand and are joined by other relations. In solidarity, they cultivate a network of community connection. And if a windstorm arrives, there is no danger to the collective because the roots are deep and ancestral. Please take a deep breath in, breath out, breath in, breath out, breath in, and breath out. We hope that you can connect to your breath throughout the duration of this session and calm some of the chaos that exists in this world. And with that, I wanted to offer an introduction to our moderator, who I will be passing this off to. Kamau is the executive director of the Washington Community Alliance, a statewide coalition of dozens of organizations and tribes led by and working in communities of color to secure multiracial democracy in Washington state. He is a DACA recipient and who intervened in a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration to ensure DACA was protected. Prior to that, Kamau was a leader in our state's immigrant youth movement, co-founding the Washington Dream Coalition. In 2014, he helped lead the effort to pass the Washington State Dream Act. Kamau is a graduate of Stadium High School and Whitworth University. Kamau, thank you so much for being here, and I now pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you, Roxana. I'm so grateful to be moderating this panel for COO. I've been a big fan for a long time of the work that people who are part of this community do every day. And I'm excited to bring insights from our esteemed panelists. First, I want to introduce Colleen Echohawk, who was raised with the belief that if there's a problem you can fix, you can jump at the opportunity to help. As an Indigenous woman, small business owner, and executive leader, Colleen holds the lived experience and vision needed to lead organizations, inviting the entire community into the story of justice and reconciliation for all of our communities. Colleen has a people's first reputation, all not just in our region, but around the state. She's a champion for change in housing, homelessness, racial justice, sustainability, and public safety. For over 2 decades, Colleen has served the most vulnerable people in the greater Seattle community as the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club, secured $100 million in new affordable housing. And at the Seattle Community Police Commission, Colleen worked hand in hand with neighbors to address the systemic racism at the heart of our criminal justice system and create progress on how we all think and rethink public safety. Colleen is the founder of the Coalition to End Urban Indigenous Homelessness, continues to passionately advocate for homeless Indigenous people in urban centers, sits on multiple boards from National Public Radio to Downtown Seattle Association, the Pioneer Square Preservation Board. You've probably read about her work in a lot of outlets and throughout many awards, from the Puget Sound Sage Visionary for Justice Award in 2018 to Seattle's Most Influential People by Seattle Magazine in 2019 and 2020, one of the 50 most influential women as named by Seattle Met Magazine. I could go on and on saying the praises of Colleen Echohawk, who's just a giant in the community and an enrolled member of the Kitahaki Band of Pawnee Nation and a member of the Upper Athabascan people of Mentasta Lake. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Multiracial Studies from Antioch University and is just shy of getting her master's in organizational development and leadership. Love to bring her on to this panel. Colleen loves, in her free time, Netflix originals and Beyonce, singing Beyonce with friends and karaoke, and got a chance to see her dog Rizzo right before we got on this panel. So excited to have Colleen here. The other person I want to bring on is Joseph, who was born in LA, grew up in Tutuila and Apollo Islands with Aiga and Samoa and peoples, and immigrated to the Coast Salish territory with his father, Aitulagi, and his siblings in 1994. He has 15 years of experience in direct service, youth development work, and nonprofit leadership and administration. Joseph champions systems change, works at the center works at the centers of leadership and history of the most impacted communities to enact social change. He's committed to ending the impact of systemic racism through coalition building, anti-racism organizing, and intergenerational leadership opportunities. Beloved, and Joseph works actively against the political erasure of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, and continue to provide soulful labor in re-envisioning what it means for Pacificans to feel cultural belonging in the US diaspora, chairs the National Association of Pacifica Organizations and the first national NHPI organization convened by leaders across the country to work on sovereignty issues in the policy work and at the intersection of health justice, data disaggregation, and research, media communication representation, and developing civic power for the Pacific communities. Serves as the executive director of PICA Washington, an organization he founded as a cultural hub for those communities. And I also want to bring on our third panelist, Zhang, who served for 3 years as a real estate strategist in the Equitable Development Initiative team, housed in Seattle's Office of Planning and Community Development. Currently on leave on the role, she blends experiences with participatory design, real estate, and somatic therapy to encourage systemic shifts needed to heal the root causes of displacement. She also occasionally writes in search of healing truths at the Bramble Project. You should absolutely check out what's been published there. I'm so excited to have these experts on our panel. And I'm real excited to learn from all of you and with all of you. The first question I think everybody wants to know is, how are y'all doing? How have the last 2 years been for you and your work? Just how are you showing up right now? I can go to anyone to start.
I'll jump in since, since there's awkward silence. How am I doing? I'm an aggressive optimist, so I tend towards optimism and just kind of thinking positively. But I will be honest that the past 6 months, it's just been harder than normal to be optimistic. And there's just, sorry, that is my dog whining back there if you hear her. But I just, I'm really working hard to make good self choices around self-care, around what I'm putting in my body, trying to exercise, just because it is one of those moments in time, I think, not just for me, but for a lot of people, where this is just hard. The pandemic, when you work in human services, it's just gone on for so long, and I'm ready for it to be over. So I'm hopeful. I'm trying to do the best I can to fill myself with joy and optimism, and it's hard. So that's how I'm doing.
All right, I'll go next. Sorry, did you want to say something, Kamau?
No, I was just going to say I definitely hear you on that duality, and just wondering how you've been feeling. How have the last 2 years been for you?
Yeah. So I think this is this question sort of like points towards like self-care. Which is, I think, a really hard discussion for like Pacific Islanders, who are often like, we come from very collectivistic, cultures, and so it's like, how am I doing is really, how is my family doing? How's my community doing? But really, like, I think the challenge for me was that I actually had to consider my individual wellness and step out of it sometimes, right, from the collective, in order for me to be stronger for my family, to be stronger for our people, right? Because I think what COVID has really done has really like stretched and stressed our people. And so you either die with everybody, which I say that with a little bit of laughter and cynicism, because there's so many deaths, right? And also unprocessed grief especially in our Pacific Island communities that have suffered the highest fatality rates through COVID. But I do say that we have been forced, because of the mental health sort of thinning, right? Due to COVID and the stress of COVID, and also the unprocessed grief and all of that stuff, we have been forced to consider ourselves. And I think that in some ways is a window of opportunity for me to consider myself in a collective that is my Pacific Islander community, and to step back and to actually acknowledge that I might be better for my community if I'm taking care of my individual self, as opposed to syncing with everybody else, right? So this we all sync mentality is, I think, a mentality that we might have had prior to COVID, but now it's like really forcing us and forcing the individual accountability factor. And so I'm tired, but I know that there's that I have a duty to take care of myself as a leader and as an individual that can contribute to the well-being of my family well after COVID, and that this isn't it. COVID is not it. We've got decades to go.
Absolutely.
I'm really resonating with just how hard for a question that we ask 50 times a day, how are you is actually of a question. Like my somatic practitioner, I'll sign on and she'll start with, how are you? And it blows up my brain right away. Like I can't handle it. And one of the things that I was thinking about actually when Kai was going through the last speaker, the last one in the speaker series, I recalled this quote that really helped me. And so I want to attribute it. This is, I heard this through Bayo Komalafe is doing this course that I'm attending right now. And one of the participants, Amber Arnold with Susu Community Farms, said this, and she said, in the West, because of our death phobia, our fear of death, we see healing as a lack of suffering or freedom from suffering, something like that. But true healing really is the ability to increase our capacity to hold suffering, to hold complexity, to be with discomfort, to dance with death. And I have certainly found that to be true for me, that it's about being able to have the joy and the grief at the same time, and the rage and the, and the gratitude, like just to see, for me, it's I have really had a chance to experience that for myself in the last couple of years, is like, and I fully acknowledge also that I've been in a really different space this last year than the other two panelists, because my circuits fried, and I did just kind of step back, and I've been basically practically in a spaceship for the last 6 months. So I've been doing I think that's enough.
Thanks so much for y'all being so open and honest about sharing, how you're doing. And I think you're exactly right, Bo. It's a question that's taken on so much more complexity during the pandemic, and especially in those moments of isolation where we couldn't have been with family. One thing I think everybody is curious to know about is, how has your work or your perspectives or your relationships changed as a response to the pandemic? And we can start there. Wondering if, Bo, you'd be wanting to start with that question.
This is such a big question. The word that jumped out right at me, actually, the first word was in response to, because in so many ways it feels like the pandemic was a quickening of what has already been happening, and what has already been happening has been just this cracking and this disruption in this system that we have been, sort of kind of all trapped in. And I would say that one of the biggest insight's the wrong word, but it really has been about death. Like, it really has been about recognizing that, and this feels risky to say, but the alternative to death is worse, by which I mean there are systems that refuse to fucking die. And that's because they never were alive in the first place. That death is a sign that we're alive, like only living things can die. And I've been realizing that, like, I've been doing so much work trying to kill this fucking system and like, get rid of it. And what I've realized is actually the system can't die because it's not alive in the first place. And if I want it to die, I actually need to breathe life into it. I need to essentially do the opposite of what I've been trying to do, which is like, let it live, so that, breathe aliveness into this world that we're living in, so that the things that are past their time can see that it's past their time. That's been the biggest shift for me, I would say. And I don't know, that feels kind of abstract, so I'm happy to go into details.
No,
but that's
I'm sitting with that. That has me thinking, and Colleen, I saw you nodding along as well as saying that, and I'm wondering, how the pandemic has changed your perspective and what you were resonating with there.
I mean, every time Bo opens her mouth, I'm just like, whoa, my mind is just blown. And Bo's a dear friend, so thank you, Bo, for sharing that and taking that risk. And it's so brilliant and also so big. And what comes to mind for me is that the pandemic, because I have the great honor and responsibility to care for people who are experiencing homelessness, and it was like literal life and death especially at the very beginning of the pandemic, where we're just like, whoa, like I'm looking into the eyes of this, like, Native elder who is like one of the last language speakers and cultural bearers, and I'm feeling the weight of the responsibility of like, I need to help her like make it through this pandemic, and just find incredibly different ways to do our work. And so death for me was like a very was a very just real, like it was happening in the moment of, and there was this feeling of protection. I mean, I'm like the oldest in my family. What Joseph said earlier really resonated with me as well. I'm so sorry. My dog is like right in my face yelling at me right now. So thank you. My husband's yelling at her to go away. But the protection piece was just really a burden, and it was an honor to do it, but it also was like just heavy and anxiety filled. So I'm sitting with what you're saying, Bo, because I'm feeling it on, two different levels. And I think that having to respond to the pandemic as a human service provider will help forever change my work going forward. And I'm still, processing what that's going to look like.
Joseph, what about you? I think I was curious now how your work has changed during the pandemic, and you touched on this a little bit in your first answer, but I hope you can add more texture to that.
Yeah, I mean, just with Bo and Colleen kind of highlighting a couple of things that I think also resonates with me, and to you, Bo, we have these completely racist, evil institutions, and they have been here for like decades and centuries. And I'm like, yeah, and the same question, right, Bo? Like, and prior to COVID, we're always like, well, it's going to take a catastrophe for this racist, evil system to come crashing, right? And we know that COVID might have reinforced capitalism and white supremacy in the ways that we are now hoarding power, and we see corporations benefit off of the suffering of Black and brown and vulnerable white communities as well, right? So that's a reinforcement of the nature of these inhumane systems. But I think more so for me as a community person and as communities, we have now seen that it really takes us, right? It's only us that actually will be able to sort of humanize, the realities and the communities that we live in. And I think communities have really leaned into ancient, like, cultural and indigenous values of reciprocity and resource stewardship and care that I think we have, like, let go of, because a lot of even Black and brown people have adopted white supremacy and individualism, the values that we now sort of live in, right, or live with, and we've said bye to the old values. But during COVID, I think there's still some memory there, and we've ushered them back in. And so if anything, I feel like COVID has allowed for us to really go through a cultural transformation, right? Especially as most impacted communities, and a revitalization of our traditions and our worth and our dignity and our fights. And then I think we also saw the lack of the commissioning of Black and brown people to leadership, the lack of, like, these white institutions haven't done shit to train our people in stewarding, like, the health and wellness of our own communities. We send our babies to these academic institutions, and they come back useless. They actually come back with values that reflect the values of the oppressor. And so what does it mean for us to create places where we commission leadership from our own communities with our own values, with our own elders, and say that we are good enough, that we have and we've always had the technology. They've just hijacked the technology and put their names on it and some patent on it, but that technology has always been us. And so I think when it comes to issues of food sovereignty, of land sovereignty, of climate justice, those are all our issues, and we have the solutions to that. And so, yeah, I'm really, like, I think it's allowed for a transformation that we're now all seeing a lot of us sort of come into basically work, right? To be the harvesters of this new energy.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. Bo, still, think about that insight that you pulled out about breathing life into the system. One of the follow-up questions we had to this was reflecting on the last couple of years and how your work and perspectives have changed. What did the pandemic allow you to dream of? And what did it allow you to do?
You're asking me that first? Okay. Well, there's like a small scale and there's little bits of scale. It's weird. The scales are oddly flipped in my head. I just realized, because the big scale stuff feels personal and the small scale stuff feels like work related, even though it's societal. I think, I don't know, for some reason, the answer that's coming to me right now is not really about work in the world. It's about, because I think I could offer some obvious answers around, like there was much greater awakening and at City Hall, like that really helped us like not have to work so fucking hard sometimes. Like there was like in the small window that we had, but I think the biggest important thing was for me just to allow, with the step back, to see that I am sensitive, and to allow that I am sensitive, and to allow myself to feel. And I think what I mean by that is like just simply I still remember like the first day that we started working from home, and I just noticed how much more I was breathing in my meetings, like just in City Hall, there's just like the deadness is everywhere. And when I say deadness, I mean numbness, it's everywhere. And so like just to be able to step back from a little bit and breathe was so important. And I feel like the ability to feel has been everything, because I honestly think that's really the trick, right? Like we're built to know what to do if we can just feel again. And so that's my answer.
Awesome. Same question to both of you. What did it allow you to dream of and do?
I'll jump in, Colleen. This is I think not a hard question, but it's a pretty nuanced question, because it's like at the cost of so much loss, right? There has been a window of opportunities, especially for for my community. For my Pacific Islander community, there's been so much loss during COVID, and not COVID, but prior to COVID. And so COVID has almost allowed us to remember the dignity of our people, and also that we have a right to have agency in our lives, in our communities, in our situations. And so I think we've been, as a people, have accepted an inferiority, a lesser place, in the world, especially in the country. And COVID reinforced all of what we thought about ourselves is actually what society also thought about us, and so the opportunity to then be able to really just lean into the technology, once again, technology of our ancestors, the wisdom of our ancestors, that runs through our veins, runs through, everything that makes us, unique in the world, has really allowed our people to say, fuck it, let's just, like really like fuck it. And a lot of the prescriptions and interventions that was coming out of the White House, coming out of Congress, coming out of, the governor's office, coming out of these local public health agencies, all of it was bullshit. They had no idea of what the solutions are for our communities, and they never had an idea. So let's turn back, to all of these ways that, when resources are being distributed to our communities, and they are so hyper vigilant about every penny that comes to our Black and Brown communities. I think COVID has allowed us to turn it back around and say, hey, fuck you. These resources actually do not belong to you. They've never belonged to you. They were accumulated on the backs of our ancestors. And how dare you dictate the ways that these resources get to be shared in our communities, right? And it is always a Pacific belief that there's an abundance, right? There's an abundance in the harvest. There's an abundance from God. There's an abundance from all of the deities that make up our pantheon, right? And that's the lie about scarcity is a white lie that was driven deep into the psyche of a lot of our communities that allow us to act all nutty, and we forget who we are because then we mimic the scarcity that has been placed there on us.
Colleen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of living out the practical, experience of what Bo and Joseph are saying, because one thing when I think back about like what the pandemic, allowed me to dream and think and do was we basically said, F the homeless system. It's been screwing our people for so long. Like I remember one, like in late March, just looking at this like elder who told me she had moved out of congregate shelter and into a tent with her 6-year-old granddaughter because she was afraid of getting COVID. And I looked at my my colleague Derek, and I was just like, we just have to do something. We have to put her in a hotel. Best practice was like, oh, you can't put folks into hotel rooms, and we had all these like BS ideas. And then, we were one of the first agencies in the country to start putting people into hotel rooms. And we just said, it's enough. It was like enough allowing this human suffering to happen to our elders and to our babies. And, since, March of 2020, we've just housed hundreds and hundreds of people. And the Native community has one of the most successful communities in getting vaccines into our community, and it's just been remarkable. And the shared unity that came into our leadership of our communities between like United Indians of all tribes and Seattle Health Board and the Chief Seattle Club, we were just like talking like constantly and just unified in our mission to really save our communities' lives. Because I mean, I don't have to tell you all, but we have a real scary history with pandemics. So there was this like unified, warrior mentality that just came out in our work. And so I look back on that and I'm just, full of pride. And it also was one of those things where this was like, you know what? The white folks have had enough time. Like they've had enough time. They've gotten us to where we're at right now, and I hate it. And so, I ran for mayor because I was so frustrated with just the status quo, and did not make it through. But still, I'm very proud of just taking the risk. And I don't think if it wasn't for the pandemic, I don't think I would have done that. But our communities are worth fighting for, and I'm gonna do it and I'm just gonna keep encouraging and lifting up our leadership, because it has changed the lives of the folks that I love.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And it's a great segue into our next question. We have 2 more long form questions. Then we're going to have 3 kind of rapid questions. And for the, over 50 people that are in the audience right now, if you're like me and the insights that they're sharing are sparking your own thoughts and your own questions, make sure to note those down, because afterwards we'll have Q&A, and love to hear those things. So, so for the first of our next two questions, in addition to this, Colleen, you touched on it by talking about what felt like it was like being reported as a really radical change, housing people in these giant buildings with keys and locks, and with governments actually responding to the demands of community to do something like that was radical. And at the same time, it was common sense and not exactly a new idea that we should house our neighbors that don't have homes right now, or have been made to not have homes. And so I have this question for you and the other panelists. That, over the last 5 events, we've been reflecting on Seia, on the imagination of our communities, and as it relates to culture shifts and new economies and abundance and philanthropies, themes that you touched on, Joseph. And this community-driven transformation in the future, and particularly in this series, we've asked panelists to engage their imagination. So I'm wondering, how do we go from dreaming into action? And Colleen, I'm hoping you can kick us off. I know actions and policies and what we could do in the here and now is something you've been deep in during the campaign, and also just daily in your work. So you want to get started with that? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm trying to keep the dog barking from this conversation, but now there's so many things that come to mind around that. I think that the participatory budget process, that to me is one of the places where we just have so many opportunities and excitement to do something there and to move into real action. And then I think lifting up those folks who have had lived experience into real leadership responsibilities, not just tokenism, not just like, hey, we throw someone on a panel here or there, but actually following their leadership and allowing for the mistakes to happen. I love the Black Brilliance Project. Sure, were there things that were hard and maybe we would do things differently now? Yes, but we have given so much room for the establishment to make all kinds of mistakes all over the place. Like I hope to see more and more of those kinds of actions happening that will make the kind of change that is truly led from the community. So and the last thing, I could answer this in so many different ways. So the final thing is just housing, and different kinds of housing than what we see out there and in the norm, or as the norm. The Pacific Islander community, what does housing look like in that community? And why aren't we building housing that looks like that and reflects the community? Is something that has to happen because cost of living in the city and housing prices are just outrageous, and we have to stop it.
Bo, do you want to take on this question about how we move from dreaming into action?
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to step back from the question for a quick second, just because something that Joseph said really it dovetails into my response to this question, which was like, man, so many of our current so much of this current system was somebody dreaming a nightmare into action, right? And when they first began the dream, the people who dreaming it didn't realize that, colonialism was a dream put into action. The military industrial complex was a dream put into action, and so in so many ways, there's what I was experiencing in the pandemic, which was kind of like the other side of what Joseph was describing, which was the city fucking spinning around and trying to coming up with all these strategy documents and questioning what our team was doing. And I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but anyway, I'm on leave, so it doesn't matter. And that was this perpetuation of somebody's dream put into action that was completely countering this other dream. And so like this dream that of aliveness. And so for me, in a way, I almost want to step back and question like because I think of other dreams, which, for example, the prophecy that it would take 7 generations for Native people to lead a multiracial coalition out of the suffering that white people brought onto this continent. Like how did that dream get put into action? And it's just, I think, we as people are such a small part of what's being played out by the land, by our ancestors. Like there are all these forces that are acting on us, and to me, like our dreams, I don't know that we're the ones doing the dreaming, that we're the ones doing the acting. I guess it's kind of my question, is part of where we're trying to go with this, like that there are things acting on us. I can't tell if my internet is laggy. I hope you can hear me.
Oh no.
Okay.
It's clear.
Great. Yeah, like we're, like there's a sort of like, I feel like there's like kind of like a human supremacy element of like we're the ones who dream and act, as opposed to like these things flow through us. And our trick is really just to like check that what we're doing are real dreams and not the rippled out nightmares of these traumas that we also bring with us.
Absolutely. Joseph, what about you? What's your take on how we move the dreaming into action? And what are some of those actions that you've been thinking about you'd like to see?
Yeah, I don't see those two things apart from each other, dream and action. It's all the same, right? And also prayer, right? Prayer, action, dreams, those are all the same to me, the same force behind it. But I see like, at least the work that we're doing at the Pacific Islander Community Association is really a fight to counteract the, like Colleen said, the diminishment of our sacred treasures, which are our elders, right? And lifting our elders up and doing programming that really honors the dignity of our elders in our lives, right? How do we fight for that, right? And also we're doing a little bit of work, also some work in empowering our young people to fight back this gangstification, right? Culture that where systems look at them and tracks them for prisons, right? Tracks them for everything else, but their gifts and their abilities and their beauty and their youth, their youthful years, right? All hijacked by the system that has no sort of message of no sort of love for our peoples, right? And so how do we look at those intersections, right? Our folks that are in prisons and really lift up the leadership and co-design new realities from those places, right? Also our folks that are undocumented, the fact that, for so long prior to COVID, they've, there's so much, there's just so much dehumanization in the way that we continue to live our lives here in this country. So many places to dehumanize, right? That we've become dead end. And so I think in the next 5 years, it's really, we have like traditions around when we're in crisis, we have new laws and rituals. We call it tapu, right? A season of tapu. But what are the new restrictions that allows us to like really bring in the work of spirituality and sort of a meditative piece that allows us to really discern, what is good for us and what is not good for us. That this whole idea of manifest destiny was an idea rooted out of genocide and an enslavement of Black people, right? And this whole manifest destiny is something that we've also adopted, thinking that there's like, that there's no end to the earth's resources, right? And that we have no obligation to the persons that is the water, the mountains, the rock, the land. And we see Indigenous people now more than ever, I think, restore some of those traditional understanding of rock and mountain and water as persons, right? and also as food as relatives. You know, in our traditional culture in the Pacific Islands, we are kin to taro. You know, the very thing that we eat we're also kin to, and similar to Coast Salish, where salmon is kin, right? And so, what are those indigenous sort of philosophies, and how do we lift those up? How do we build practice around it? I know the Quinault Indian Nation has done a lot to fight for our forest and to lengthen the life cycles of our forest, over and against the federal sort of standards of what the life, you know, the life of a tree should be, right? Those things all matter and all are intertwining. And I appreciate the pause, but I really feel like we need to continue to work and stay alert, and stay human, you know, even in the next 5 to 10 years, because we know what happens to these systems is they have a very peculiar nature of amnesia, right? Just erasing the histories, and taking us back to step zero. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the point you made about discernment. And it dovetails so well with our last long form question. Then want all of you to prepare for some rapid fire. I hear you talking a lot about, the rupture that COVID created in the ways that, for the first time, at least that I've ever seen, people really forced to reckon with this rugged, racialized capitalism and kind of the ways in which we haven't been taught to be respectful of the resources. We've been put in that scarcity mindset that you all have brought forward. And in this series, a theme that I think we really want to touch on is given those actions were motivated by crisis and tragedy and trauma and pain, how do we move to a place where our collective actions and transformations aren't motivated or fueled by those circumstances, that the crises aren't necessary to create those transformations? And what would you say to the audience here that's thinking about that? How can we have those transformations without them needing to be triggered by a crisis? And Colleen, I'd love if you would start us off on this question.
Oh, I mean, I'd love to think about it for a minute and pass it to Joseph or Bo and not just chat about it and not have something good to say. So Joseph or Bo.
Yeah, I'd love to invite you into this. Bo, do you want
could you say that question one more time?
So just think about, how do you have collective action and transformation that isn't created by or generated by crisis? We don't have to have those crises or to fuel the kind of radical change in thinking and actions.
I do have a thought on that. And part of it is just that I'm so touched by, I feel like listening to Colleen and Joseph describe your work in the world and what you do and how you see the world. I feel like, I mean, yes, you're both clearly amazing people, and this is the work of people who feel, this is and to me, the issue with crisis is that the question is kind of why couldn't we feel all the other stuff? Why did it take that much before to motivate something? And I think it does come back to numbness, and I don't know why, but I feel really drawn. I think the reason that I'm feeling called to say something about it is that it feels like such a foil, like what Joseph and Colleen are describing of their work, and sort of what I was experiencing at City Hall. It feels like two ends of a battery trying to walk toward each other, and I'm just remembering a moment that is still pretty potent for me, and it's an early moment, but I don't know. I think there's something in my life that is about understanding how numbing happens and opening back up to feeling, because I'm just remembering, and maybe this is up because we were talking about death earlier, and it was my birthday yesterday, but my grandmother died on my 8th birthday. And my mom, she'd helped raise me until I was 5, and My mom was just really deep in her grief because, you know, she hadn't seen her mother since she had left China. And so my mom said that it was because my grandma had raised me and that I had just been too much. And I remember I couldn't feel anything. Like my, I remember like the terror of like, and I didn't feel terror either, but I just remember this like, okay, people in movies cry when somebody dies. My grandma's dead. I'm not crying. There's something seriously wrong with me. Like I remember that, you know, and I think what I just want to highlight is that numbing happens for a reason, you know, and so much of it is just that like we live in a really overwhelming world and shit happens, you know, shit happens and our circuits get overloaded and we just, you know, shut down, you know, we shut down. And so much of my path has been a path to like, learning that not feeling was a problem. I was super proud of not being able to feel for a real long time because like feeling hurts, you know, and then and so much of that was for me somatic therapy, but I really do feel like what it comes down to is like we are wired to feel. The reason we go numb is because feeling can get overwhelming, and that they're like, you know, when we're feeling, we don't need such major crises to hit. But that was my experience at the institution, was like just kind of like starting to find empathy for my own numbness, and you know, and kind of get that shit happens to everybody, you know, even the people we call privilege. I mean, to me, frankly, I the word privilege is really tricky to me, because I feel like sometimes we get caught in this trap of defining the things that we want based on what the system thinks that people want, which is like money or status. But privilege is also the ability to resist your own transformation. You know, privilege is the ability to be numb and stay numb and not have to do something about it. It's not really winning.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, to both points, you know, it's always been what, numbness, right? Prior to COVID, right? The disaster's already here, you know, like the suffering's already here, right? So I think there's also fragility, right? That there's some sort of fragility that is, and a level of individualism that is tolerated in this country and in this capitalistic structure, right? That dispossesses people from their relationships to themselves, their families, you know, their community members, right? And it's a disembodying, it's a dissonance, right? From your humanity. So I think we've tolerated a high level of like being able to experience and witness the indignities, you know, that go on in our countries, and still be able to sleep, right? Many of us, right? I remember the first time I moved to this country, and I came from the Samoan Islands, and I had never witnessed the suffering of homelessness, you know, and seeing folks experience homelessness on the streets. I remember it being a huge impact, like a weeping, you know, that happens about, oh my gosh, how can this happen, you know, to this community. So there's almost a deadening, you know, to our humanity that happens in societies that have not been able to maintain the traditions of dignity, right? The traditions of dignity, and even like, you know, there's always going to be suffering, right? But the levels of suffering, the levels of violence, the levels of systematic violence, and the deadening of ourselves to those injustices is really what we're seeing in the realities in this country. And so I think thinking about things of like, I mean, it's how do we go after dignity, you know? How do we go after, and dignity comes hand in hand with culture, right? With teaching people who they are, with fighting for our languages. There's a Native people actually fighting for the dignity of humanity when they're fighting for language sovereignty, right? Because we don't want to lose that. A core part of who we are and a core part of being an embodied people is our native languages, our, you know, the languages of our ancestors, the culture, the protocols, even with death, right? When somebody dies, there's so many protocols protocols in indigenous communities, not just here in the Americas, in the Pacific, everywhere, right? And every community should have that intact. But I think the more and more we as a people are here in this country, and this cultural assimilation that happens, I think really is something that we have to constantly fight against, right? And we do that through the local movements. We do that through building authentic places of learning and of culture, not universities, right? We have to turn away from those, because those are not wisdom traditions and wisdom institutions for our people. You know, that just perpetuates the same illness, right? That we need a doctor out of our people and out of ourselves. And so I think we have solutions that that we can offer around the question of human dignity, and the human dignity is very much related to the dignity of the environments, you know, that we live in and the food that we eat.
You both are just so brilliant, and I'm so glad that I passed it on to you first, because I think, especially Bo, I just resonate so much. I think that one of the things that as we come out of the pandemic, for all of us, because I'm a feeler too, you know, like I feel, but I also just confess to my numbness right now, is as we have just been, you know, bombarded with so much. And the only other thing I just want to add is that I'm really hoping for freedom and freedom for, I don't know exactly how to express this, but for our younger generation. I'm thinking about my kids, like they're being raised in a different way than I was raised, and but with similar values, but without a lot of the shame. And I think, you know, I was raised with just a shit ton of shame all over the place, you know, and they're being raised with just the urgent. They're urgently encouraged to have pride in who they are as Indigenous young people, and so I am excited to participate in that, because they're teaching me about that along the way, and they're helping me reduce my own shame and my own numbness as I see them live their lives.
It's amazing, and I think we should all try to embody that kind of righteous pride about our communities. Well, we are nearing the last part of our panel. We have 3 rapid questions. So we'll ask for what comes first to mind for you in a sentence for these questions. All right. So this will be fun. Starting with Bo, and then going to Joseph, and then Colleen. Where have you seen transformation happening?
This is hilarious. You started with me. I'm like so not a fast thinker. A lot of places, the valuing of wellness and rest, questioning our individual roles in the system, understanding restorative justice, understanding the importance of BIPOC community leadership, and all of that's growing.
South King County.
I think the movement in arts and culture, and the importance of storytelling.
These are good. Okay, so here's a second one, and Joseph, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Bo and Colleen on this question. We talked a lot about visions and dreaming, and we often use the metaphor of a table. So let's engage in some imagination. And in one sentence, who needs to be brought to the table, or what tables need to be built?
It's a tough one. So I mean, we always talk about building our own tables, right? So why are we fighting so hard to get to those tables? Our tables are brilliant already. So having our tables, and we might not even need a table. A lot of us come from traditions where we sit on the ground and eat. So there it is. We don't need a table. Come on.
I actually echo that. I think the table's the earth, and the land, and everything else is practice for listening to those that don't speak in human language.
Yeah, I just 100%. I say we tear down the table and build a sweat lodge and a longhouse and F that table. I never want to sit at it again. I hate it.
Amazing.
It's bad for your back anyways.
Yeah. I say we build comfy chairs that have like heating pads built into them for our backs because I'm old.
Yes, let's, I like that idea. Okay, and then bringing ourselves back to the energy that we started this panel with, and everybody taking a deep breath. Our last question, and offering to our audience before we move to Q&A, is what prayer or blessing do you offer the collective as we move into the future?
I will just share because I love this question. I just want to say how much I appreciated this agenda too. I think it was a really really grateful for Roxana and whoever else put this together, because I think it was I really liked the way that this all happened today. And this immediately when I saw that question, I thought of this poem by Joe Harjo, and it's a long poem, so I won't read it all to you, but it is called For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in Its Human Form. And I'll just read the last portion of it as a blessing for all of you. It says, welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters, gather them together. They'll be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it's bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. And every Indian person in the whole world laughs at this part because the speeches are always long. So keep the speeches short. Then you must do this: help the next person find their way through the dark.
All right. So this is actually, it's a funeral chant. It's actually a Psalm 1 funeral chant. We call it an opening of the heavens, right? To usher in our folks in to the other realm, in peace, right? But you know, as I think about Bo, always talk about like our way that we've all sort of been trying to run away from death, right? And also thinking about these systems that need to die. but yeah, I'm glad, Bo, that you gave it a better, more nuanced definition, that they're actually not, they can't die because they're not alive. And so this is actually a funeral chant for those things that are alive. And I'll say it in the English version, and we'll do it in the Psalm 1 version. But we honor the first heavens, which gave birth to our first mothers, the darkness and the void. We honor the second heaven, which gifted us with our most sacred sense of smell. We honor the third heaven, which gave us spirit to animate the dust. We honor the fourth heaven, which gave way to the knowable and gifted us with wisdom. We honor the fifth heaven, which gave us our purpose in obtaining stewardship. We honor the sixth heaven, which gave spirit to the earth. We honor the seventh heaven, which gave spirit to the standing rock. We honor the eighth heaven, which gave spirit to the wandering stones. And we honor the ninth heaven, which gave spirit to our sacred mountains.
Wow. May we each find our way ever closer to ourselves, and in our walk, inspire others to come closer to their true selves. And may we find the places where our healing work in the world also heals ourselves.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for what you've offered and your insights and answers, those prayers and blessing, and also, really putting your feeling and your emotion forward on these themes. And I'm so excited that this is the way we're getting to close out this beautiful 6-part series that CEO have been putting together. Now we have questions from the audience here. And so I'll start with one of the first ones that we got. Yeah, let me do a second one, and then I'll come back to the first one that we got. So we got a question from Zhang. If we are to imagine a society where those who've been oppressed find their agency, where is a safe space for those who are complicit in perpetrating the oppression?
Sorry, could you read the question again?
Yeah, that's why we should have had a white panelist, because that's their labor. We don't know. We should have invited our white panelists because they need to do labor too, and that's their work.
Yeah. The gist of the question was, where's the safe space for those who are complicit in perpetrating the oppression, if we're imagining a society where those who have been oppressed find their agency? I'll try to keep these short because we have 10 minutes left too. I want to get to everyone's questions.
I can offer something, which is that as somebody who's very much like in this weird in between space of oppressor and oppressed, when I'm in China, my people are, they're absolutely perpetrating cultural genocide on Chinese Muslims, and it's an in between space. And what I found personally is that we all can harken back to, at the very least, an understanding of oppression, because we've all been children. And that I think the way the work is done, and I might not be answering this question, so tell me if I'm not, but for me is as I better understand what happens to me in the role of having been oppressed and being oppressed, and I can find my own agency in that, like that also makes it so that I'm no longer essentially rippling out those harms that were done to me on other people, because that's somehow the way that I expect things to be. And it's a little hard to unwrap that, just because it's like 4 years of somatic therapy training later to say that. But Nancy Luna Jimenez does a really great job of kind of unwrapping that, just the way that hurts that were perpetrated on us, that we weren't allowed to metabolize in the time, not being believed, having our truths not matter, having our feelings not matter, those kinds of things. When we can't express and they get stuck in our bodies and trapped in our bodies, then we end up replicating that in society, depending on our positionality. So we all have it. And we also are, as humans, all oppressors of a lot of other living beings. So we all are in the duality somewhere.
Just viewer Colleen want to add to that for this question, or have an offering, and then I'll go to the next question submitted by an attendee.
Yeah, my offering has always been that we're all in this work. We're all in the work of doing anti-racist, organizing and the humanizing work, right? We all have our place to do the labor. So don't ask oppressed people to do the labor for the oppressors, right? That's a tough question. And I throw this question back to a lot of my folks that come from more privileged, communities. What is your responsibility to providing space for your brethren and sisterin and kin to do that work of transformation? Because I don't think I could offer anything, in that space, because that's not necessarily the community I come from. And I also understand the nuance that Bo was talking about. But at the end of the day, I'm a hard believer that communities of color don't have power to change racist institutions and to impact, like we don't have the power to drive the full changes that we need. And we actually need white people to do their work, to do their work alongside us.
Absolutely. It's really at the core of it is that question of responsibility. Bo, when you mentioned one of your insights, it got one of the attendees thinking. And so this is one of the questions that we got from you. When you said, if we want the system to die, we need to breathe life into it. They're wondering, what does that look like in their work? How do we carry that out?
It can literally start with breath. It can literally be like what, how we started today with just breathing. And for me, what I think I'm kind of on this path of like more courageously bringing feelings into spaces that are really not into feeling things. And so like somatics and expression and, bringing things back, breathing life into things is really just about waking up the fact that the system is actually just made up of people in various degrees of ability to feel. And so we can all we can help each other feel more. I don't know if I answered that.
I think that was a great answer. I also remember seeing Joseph and Colleen, you nodding when that kind of nugget of insight was shared, and I'm wondering if it came up when we're thinking about how that would apply to you or your work.
Colleen and we share a long history in the homelessness systems of fighting for our lived experience folk. And, so it's very peculiar in Seattle where, when they talk about racism, they talk about institutionalized racism, right? And it's not, we're undoing racism, we're undoing institutional racism. And I think it's very peculiar in the Pacific Northwest because we've often hit a lot of our racism within the institutions through our DEI work, through our social justice toolkit that the city has developed and hijacked from anti-racist organizers. And now it's like, oh, they're not racist anymore. They've got a social racial justice toolkit. And so I think of all of the ways that institutions don't have, because they're kind of like, sorry, this is a really bad analogy, but they're kind of like viruses. They need hosts, right? And humans are actually the ones that move the institution, right? So it's really the human person that needs to be treated and intervened upon, right? Because oftentimes we use the excuse of, oh, the institution is that way. You've projected all the power on this form, the institution, in which you participate in. And I don't care how many people want to fight me, but everybody in that institution is a gatekeeper for that institution, driving the mission of the institution that comes from the janitor all the way up to the CEO, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has a responsibility in these institutions to either do what Bo is saying, breathe life into the institution, or keep it dead, keep it dead.
I had a very similar answer to that too, Joseph. Like, I think that, when people asked me when I was running for office, like, what would the first 6 months look like? And my immediate response is that there'd be more babies, because, and that there would be more, families involved in our work. When I go to my council meeting for my tribe, there are literally children sitting with council presidents or with the leaders. What would it, and I say that so that we would like blow up the way that we normally do things. Like, what if you walked into the mayor's office, instead of it being like the sterile place it is, what if there were like toys for kids to be playing at, and there were mothers and things happening? And so when Amazon comes in to have a meeting, they have to go through that. And so that is transformation. That is making these systems that we're all a part of move and change for the generations to come.
I love the synthesis I just heard from all of you, and bringing more families and actually literally bringing life into the system in those meetings. Just really incredible insight. This has been an amazing panel. Love the audience has been riding with us. And just all the different things that we got to touch on. We're coming to a close, so I want to pass it off to Roxana to bring us home.
Thanks, Kamau. And thank you so much to Bo, Joseph, and Colleen. I knew this was going to be fire. I just, you just don't know how the fire is going to unfold. So deep gratitude to you three and to you, Kamau, for holding the space and for moderating this conversation. This is the kind of conversation, this is the kind of thoughts that we wanted to come about this last one, right? And we use the word possibilities because there's so much that is possible. There's so much that is possible for our communities, for our future, for this planet. And so I hope that what you all heard today were just seeds that were planted. And now I just hope that we all are able to cultivate and water those seeds. And hopefully we can all walk in an abundant garden one day, because we all are deserving of that. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm so honored to have been chosen to do this work alongside COO. It has definitely have been a very affirming and validating process for me. And Manny, to be able to do this work and hold this space alongside a government entity. So I just want to thank Kai and her team at COO for their leadership and for holding the humanity down, because it's really appreciated and it's honored and it's valued. So I just want to say mil gracias, muchísimas gracias. Thank you all so much. And I don't know if Kai, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all again. Thank you for being here and allowing this breath to enter into our government spaces. This is a funded speaker series through shared resources, philanthropy, and government. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom. And for everybody that's been joining us, thank you for joining us. We have dropped the link to a survey in the chat. Please fill it out, give us your feedback, and we're going to come back in 2022 and hope to continue these conversations and keep the momentum going. So thank you. And thank you, Roxana. It's been so much fun.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you all. Blessings and stay fly.
Bye.
Thank you.
Much.